Leading to Here. Extraordinary stories from everyday leaders.
Welcome to Leading to Here. This is a podcast series where we'll spend a little time with some of the amazing, relatable, everyday people, often unsung heroes, who we've met and worked with at Think in Focus over the last 7 years. Today, Ricky and I are talking to Nicola Marshall. Nicola is People Director for Welcome Break. She's had a career that has seen her work across the hospitality sector and transition from operations into HR, and now into senior leadership. As well as all that, she's a wife, a mum, and a doggy mum. Nicola, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I suppose Welcome Break is a brand that we're all reasonably familiar with, but just tell us a little bit about your current role and the business that you work for.
So, Welcome Break is is the largest motorway services area business in the UK. Operates 50 different motorway services and trunk road service areas, predominantly on A roads up and down the UK and Northern Ireland. Bit of an unknown entity for most people. Actually, we're a large franchise business.
Right.
So when you walk into a Welcome Break, and whether or not you're in a Starbucks or a KFC, every single person that works in that building works for Welcome Break. And we operate all of those businesses under a franchise license. Right.
Okay.
So my role ultimately is to take care of the 6,500 people that work across those 50 odd locations in the business. Make sure they are looked after, well remunerated, they're trained, they're developed, and we've got a growth pipeline for the future.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll dig into your current role and Welcome Break a little bit more as we try and track through your career and what has led you to here.
Okay.
So let's try and go back a little bit then, Nicola. Let's try and go back to the beginning. So tell us a bit about you when you were growing up. What were you like as a kid? What was school like for you? What was going on there?
So my dad laughs and just thinks karma's kind of got me.
Tell us more.
So as mum to a now 14-year-old daughter, she is apparently more like me than I would ever know myself.
Right. Okay.
So I think my earliest childhood memory is a memory of my dad falling asleep on our lounge carpet. With do you remember those suction things that they stuck to the floor and a kid would bash it and had like a ball in the middle of it? To entertain me while I was asleep, my dad stuck it to his forehead and then was playing with me on the carpet. And I'd clearly at some point fallen asleep, but so had he. And he woke up in the morning and it was still stuck to his forehead.
And he got a big red mark.
And he had a big red mark on his head, on his forehead, like a target for about 5 days. And so I've never lived this down, and it was in his speech at my wedding.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in Stevenage, in Hertfordshire. So
hold on, we don't call it Stevenage, do we, Nicola?
No, we don't know. St Evanage. So grew up in Stevenage in Hertfordshire, just outside London. Back in the 80s and 90s, kind of enjoyed school.
Yeah.
Actually, my primary school was quite small. It took me 15 minutes to walk to school. But I used to be able to see it out my bedroom window. But I had to cross a road to get to it. So my mum and dad used to make me walk to school the long way.
You weren't allowed to cross the road?
I wasn't allowed to cross the road. But I could see the school out my bedroom window. And if I'd have walked to school the short way, it would have taken me about 30 seconds. But so my kind of primary school was quite small. It was quite unique. And I grew up in a very white environment. Yeah. So I must have been about 8 or 9 when we had our first black student join the school.
And you remember that then?
And I remember that, yeah. Her name was Marie. Marie Ashu, and I remember that really clearly. And she was fostered as well, so she really stood out as somebody that was a bit different to everybody else that was there.
How did everyone else react to that then?
You learn biases as a kid. You're not born with them. You learn them. So for us, she just looked a bit different. She spoke English really well. She wasn't she didn't speak a different language. She probably did, but at school she spoke English, and I became really good friends with her. Yeah. And over the years, we lost contact and stuff. But so I've got some really clear childhood memories that have kind of played themselves back, I guess, in terms of my career. Yeah. And while I was at primary school, my parents split up, which was quite unusual, I guess, as well at that sort of time. And my mum worked really hard, not doing a disservice to my dad, but my dad left.
So did you you stayed and lived with your mum?
Yeah, stayed and lived with my mum. My mum had been a stay-at-home parent for a really long time, and she went back to work, and she worked, and she was like an assistant in a community centre. So she kind of helped run a local community centre. Yeah. So she was really involved in local community from really early on, and I guess I would have been known as like a latchkey kid at that point. Yeah. Front door key sellotaped on the inside of the letterbox, and everybody knew. And I'd have to walk my sister home. I got a younger sister. She's 2 years younger than me. I'd make sure I collected her from her classroom, and then we would walk home.
So quite a lot of responsibility then at a young age.
But we'd get home about 4:45, and my mum would be behind us at 4 o'clock. Community centres close early and stuff, so she'd be there to take us to school. But she worked really hard to give us everything that we wanted and needed, actually, as kids growing up. So I went to local secondary school, and it was the school that my mum had gone to. Right. My mum's one of 5 girls, and she's the oldest of the 5 girls.
So had they left a mark at that school?
My mum had left a mark at that school. So my mum went to the local comp, and then the other 4 behind her went to the girls' school. Right. So I went to school, and day one, there was a couple of teachers there. Again, teachers that have really left their mark on me. Mr. Wallace and Mr. Smith.
Okay, what was it about Mr. Wallace and Mr. Smith?
They taught my mum.
Okay.
They taught my mum, and they taught my uncle and a couple of other people. So my surname growing up was Golds, and I was forever known as Nikki Phillips. Right? It's my mum's maiden name. So they couldn't differentiate, and I actually quite looked like my mum. So the teachers just never really differentiated, and I was constantly yelled at in the corridors of, "Nikki Phillips, get back into your classroom." And I'd be able to walk past it because I was like, "You're not talking to me." Mr. Merv Smith and Richard Wallace. So Richard Wallace lived around the corner and had sons similar age to me, and I'd become really good friends with his boys. But he was one of these teachers that they had the fear of God. Right?
Yeah.
And everybody feared them.
I think we all had something like that at school, didn't we?
I did.
Yeah.
But they were the most amazingly engaging teachers. Yeah. And so Mr. Wallace, or Richard Wallace, was an English teacher, and they were both on the senior leadership team within the school. But they were just inspirational role models to look up to. So
what was it then that they were doing or role modelling that connected with you?
They just had that. They just commanded respect. The way they spoke to people, they were firm, but they were really respectful. They'd shout if they needed to, back in the time where you could shout and holler at kids in school and stuff. But they were really respectful, and they were really good at what they did. And they would help anybody. So it wasn't just about standing at the front of the classroom, I'm right, you're wrong. They were very heavily involved in different sporting activities. And they were there. They commanded respect.
Was that something you sort of started picking up on there, how people role model and act and behave, and how important it is for people that are around them?
Now that if I look back at it now, yes, I think so. Whereas back then I just saw, two middle-aged white men who just gave me a bit of grief
Yeah.
for being a bit of a troublesome teenager.
But now you appreciate
But now
it.
I appreciate that, and actually that sort of discipline, that sort of firm but fair attitude, and that kind of behaviour. And they didn't tolerate bad behaviour. You know, if I messed around in class, I was out of the room, and I was out of the room a lot as a student, because I just got bored really easily. So I get bored and I get distracted, and I, you know, ask my boss now. That's never changed. I get bored, I get distracted, and
That Nicola I recognise.
again, yeah. So if it's not interesting enough, or we're talking at something at a slightly lower level than what I can take in,
Yeah.
I can get really distracted really quickly, and then I start going looking for things to fix. I kind of breezed through I got through my GCSEs, and I did as well as I thought I was going to do, and they were all A to C, to be fair, and I thought, oh, well, A levels would be all right, and A levels were just a completely different kettle of fish. You know, only doing three subjects.
What was it then? It was
three subjects, much more intense.
Yeah.
Very exam led.
Right.
I'm much better with something like a BTEC or
So you're building up as you
apprenticeship,
go.
and you build it up, and it's modular. I'm much better like that. So I found the A levels just that little bit tougher, and I was so sick of studying after that point. And that was it. I wasn't.
So
going
what
to
happened after
university.
that then? You didn't go to uni. What?
I wasn't going to university. I was done. I was
So it
done
was-
with education.
So it was like, I want a job.
I want a job. I want to go and earn some money. And I'd worked since I was 15. Anyway, well, I'd had a paper round since I was about 13, and I needed to work to fund my going out habit. And going out and having a good time and being on the dance floor and stuff. So, and clothes to go out and
So you'd become independent. So you
really early.
So you've had an upbringing where you've had to stand on your own 2 feet. Where did ambition kick in? Did you go into the workplace and just think, what's this all about then?
No,
and how can I get
not at
on?
all.
Or what was it?
When I first started, so I worked bussing tables at the local Harvester. And so that was my first taste of a proper hospitality business.
Yeah.
And, you know, 16 years old, bussing tables, bit more money than I was earning previously.
You're working plenty of shifts at this point then?
2 or 3 a week.
Yeah.
And then I really enjoyed doing the door hosting. And I got to understand how you operate a restaurant from a door host. How do you take people in, sit them at tables? How do you manage the booking system and stuff? And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I got to talk to everybody that came through the door.
Yeah.
Take them to their table, talk to them about the salad cart, the world-class salad cart, the world-famous salad cart, get their bread rolls and stuff. And sit down. I had some regulars and I loved it. I really enjoyed it.
So you were enjoying the social side of it, talking to the customers, that customer-facing bit, but you were also working out the business side of it and how does this work?
Yeah. So I did enjoy it, and I did enjoy the business element of it. And I don't think I was particularly ambitious at that point. I'm just really nosy. This is where I see it. I just think I'm really nosy. And when I turned 18, I was like, can I go and work? I'd worked on the dispense bar on Saturday nights. So I wasn't experienced enough to run the restaurant on a Saturday night. And there was a lady that did that. And I tended to run the restaurant on the days that Chrissy was not available. So her days off.
Right.
I ran the restaurant on
Chrissy
her days
was?
off. She was
the manager.
A manager that her main job was to host the restaurant.
Okay.
But I hosted on the days that she was not on. And so I was able to bus tables. I wasn't allowed to obviously waitress because I wasn't 18 because I couldn't take alcohol orders.
Yeah.
So I'd learned to work on the dispense bar. So I'd learned how to pour drinks. I'd learned how to make coffee, like proper coffees and stuff, filter coffees and everything that went with it. But I could pour pints at 16, 17 and just wasn't allowed to take the cash.
Yeah.
So the minute I turned 18, I was like, do I want to work the bar or do I want to work the restaurant?
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to work in the kitchen. And I chose the bar. So I worked on the bar on Saturday nights and stuff when it was Saturday night, Sunday lunchtime were my kind of core dates. Friday night was my night for going out. Saturday night, I'd worked out I made more tips on a Saturday night than a Friday night. So I went out on a Friday night. Saturday night was working and I'd always worked Sunday lunch. And I'd always work any opportunity where there was for double or triple time. So it's really annoying my mum. Mother's Day was one of my favourite days to be at work.
You're going to earn more money.
The only day I was not allowed to work was Christmas Day. Because as I said,
Well, you would
Christmas
have, I take
Day,
it.
No, Christmas Day, I said, it's a really big deal for my family.
Yeah.
If we wanted anything, it went on our birthday list or it went on our Christmas list. And we waited for Christmas. And so Christmas Day was the one day I was not allowed to work. There was no argument in that. I just didn't go on the roster. So I did that, but I'd also done, so I decided I was not going to university and I wanted to work in an office.
Why?
Don't know why, but I wanted to work in an office. So I passed my driving test really early. The minute I was 17, I had my licence. 6 months later, I was driving, had my car ready to go.
Yeah.
Crashed it 2 days after I had it, but I had my car. My mum's car
For 2
crashed.
days?
Crashed my mum's car. Actually, my mum had a little Citroen Saxo.
Yeah,
Saxo
I remember them.
VTR. Had a little pin pad thing to put your thing in. She'd just had an operation. I was borrowing her car and I crashed it. But I panicked. I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't want to bother my mum because she was in hospital. And so I'd phoned my friend's dad, who owned a garage, and said, Dave,
Help.
I've crashed my mum's car. She's going to kill me. She's in hospital. So he redid the panel for me.
Yeah.
And she didn't know, but she did know because he'd told her. But and now it's like one of those things. What was I doing? I was running around after my sister, of all things.
Okay.
Trying to pick my sister up.
So hang on a minute. It's your sister's fault for you crashing the car?
Yeah. And me probably getting a little bit of road rage on a roundabout and hitting the barrier. That's what I did.
An argument with the barrier.
Yeah, and I had a little argument with the barrier.
You need to make sure your mum listens to this. She'll find the true story.
She does know, but
Well, she does now.
well, she did anyway. But
So you're driving, you're independent, you're moving about, you're learning lots, you're doing all that kind of stuff, you're getting a bit of money.
And I went to work in a sales administrator job in a company in Milton Keynes. Mm-hmm. And my uncle was actually the managing director. I didn't tell the rest of the team that he was my uncle.
He was your uncle.
And so somebody else interviewed me and gave me the job. And I'd probably been in this job about 8 weeks, and I went, I don't want to do this forever. So I applied to university. I just didn't tell anyone.
Oh, right. So you applied to uni.
So I applied to uni to go the following year, though.
Yeah.
And I spent my whole year working in this sales
And
administration
what was it
job.
was that you didn't like about it? What?
I just realised I wasn't going to go anywhere. Like, I just, at that point, thought, right, so I'm earning, £17,000 a year. And then I looked at the two sales managers, and I looked at the office manager. It was a really little company.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to be you, and I don't want to be you. And how am I going to get out of this and into a better paying job if I don't have a degree?
So I've got.
So I saw a degree as a means to an end.
Yeah.
I applied.
So where was uni? Where were you going to go?
I wanted to go further away from home. I
Right.
didn't want to stay at home. I wanted to go away from home. I wanted to do the whole university experience. I went and looked at a few. Didn't like Liverpool at
When
all.
you went and looked at a few, did you do all that on your own?
I went with my friends, not with my parents. I went with my friends.
Yeah.
And some were already at university, so I went up and looked at Newcastle. My friend was at Newcastle. Went to Leicester and looked at De Montfort because I had a couple of friends there. And a friend and I, we went and she'd had a year out as well. And we went and looked at Liverpool, John Moores. And I went, I just don't like Liverpool. I just can't see myself living here. Anyway, the one that I didn't go and look at is the one that I applied for. And I was like, I want to go to Manchester. I want to go to Manchester. I want to go to Manchester Met. Got in, rocked up on my first day at Crewe. Crewe's not Manchester.
If you enjoy Leading to Here, listen to our sister podcast, The Question Is, by Thinking Focus.
So what happened? Did you stick it out then?
I finished university.
Yeah.
So
And were you always in Crewe then? You didn't.
no,
Or
so
you-
there's a bit of I did my first year, halls of residence, party animal, threw myself into university life. And I came home for the first Christmas and my back was killing me. And I put it down to uncomfortable bed and stuff. And I went to the doctor. And the doctor said, yeah, that's your liver.
Oh, really?
That's your liver complaining. And if I was you, I'd have a Christmas detox and think about how much you have to drink. Like if there was a night out, I went and I managed to get a job in the local pub.
Yeah.
And
you work in the bar again.
Work in the bar, nightclub next door, and stuff. So I got through the first year. Well, I got to Christmas and said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to stop this kind of party lifestyle. Finished the first year. Came home, worked, got a couple of temp jobs through the summer, worked through all of that, went back second year in a house, and I was like, I just don't enjoy this. I'm doing it because I think I need a degree.
Means to an end. Yeah. You
Business management degree. Didn't really know what to do. It's quite generic. And that, I think it was in my second year was the first year that I'd picked up a HR module, which was employment law.
Yeah.
And I did contract law and I did employment law in the same year. And I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the marketing piece.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the HR piece. I didn't enjoy the finance piece at all. And I saw myself through the second year, but I was going home every weekend in my second year because the jobs that I'd had in the summer, I'd retained them. So I worked in a pub.
Yeah.
And in my second year, my first lecture of the week was on a Tuesday afternoon. So I had Mondays and Tuesday mornings off.
Yeah.
And then my lectures during the week, they finished on a Friday lunchtime.
So you could work
So I came home.
Friday evenings and...
Friday, I drove home on a Friday afternoon. I worked Friday night. I worked Saturday lunchtime and I worked Sunday lunchtime.
So you are, so far, throwing yourself into everything. You're throwing yourself into studying because it means to an end. You're throwing yourself into socialising. You're throwing yourself into working.
Yeah.
It's a theme that will continue through Nicola's career.
And so working in Norwich Union, there was this lady called Alice, and she'd broken her arm or something, but she'd had to have it pinned together and plated and stuff. But she was the training person. She was trying to write training material with one arm. And I said, I can help you with that. You sit next to me and you tell me what you want to type, and I'll type it up. I'll type up the training guides because I've been working in it. So I know what we need to do, and I know the steps and the processes and the KPIs and everything. I'll type it. And then, so we were typing up these kind of training guides, and I was then saying, do you know what would be really helpful, having just gone through that, is some screenshots.
Yeah.
So let's do some screenshots, and that shows how you input this. And I got a bit of training experience, if you like, really early on. And I said, right, I'm going, thanks so much. I've done my 3 months, I'm going back to university. They were like, oh,
we'd like you to stay.
We'd like you to stay. And so I'd stayed on a Monday and I would help Alice write up the training material. And she would be in the classroom Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday delivering, and we would make all the amends on a Monday. And I'd type it all up and everything for her. And then my third year, so I'd said, like, this is ridiculous. I'm driving home. I'm spending a fortune in fuel driving home. And I looked for, could I take what I had done so far and take it to a different university? So what was the University of Luton, it's now the University of Bedfordshire.
Yeah.
I moved back home for my third and final year. Those 2 years that I'd already done counted for nothing, and everything was then crammed into my final year.
And you're still working and you're still studying.
Still working, still studying, still working at Norwich Union, still got the job in the pub. And I did my dissertation on group stakeholder pension plans. So I did my dissertation because I had all the information because I was working at Norwich Union.
Yeah.
And so that job helped me with a dissertation and everything. And they gave me the time and they gave me something to write about.
So then what happens then? Do you go back to hosting? Do you go, right, how can I mix that with HR? Did you start getting into that then?
So I got a place on a graduate programme. And I went to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Started renting cars out.
Right. And my granddad, I've never had somebody so disappointed in me. Right. So I was the first of all of so my mum is, as I said, my mum is the oldest of 5 girls.
Yeah.
I'm not the oldest grandchild. I'm the second oldest grandchild. My cousin is 12 days older than I am. And, but I was the first grandchild to go to university.
Okay.
And my granddad was so proud of it.
Yeah.
So proud of it. And he would be the one that would go, don't tell your mum, here's £100.
Yeah.
Go and enjoy yourself. But I was really close to my granddad. And he was a golf player. And I used to laugh about, well, you're spoiling a good walk, granddad.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't a very good caddy for him. I didn't really care about which club he needed and which was which and pulling them out of the caddy bag. But what I was very good at was very good at cleaning them. And so he would come back from golf on a Sunday and I'd clean his
golf clubs. So why was he disappointed then in the enterprise rent-a-car? Did he not think that you'd been to uni and he got a degree and this was it, and then
I spent my first 6 weeks working for Enterprise Rent-a-Car cleaning cars.
Okay.
Right, and I would come home and he would say, "What'd you do today?" And I said, "I cleaned 10 cars." I was in a suit. I was in a pair of Patrick Cox loafers that I'd been so proud I'd saved a bit of money, and I bought this really nice pair of shoes. I'd have to go to work in a suit, and what would I be doing? Cleaning cars.
He wanted more for you.
Yeah. And was like, I didn't pay for you to go to university for you to clean cars.
He wanted more.
And so 6 weeks into this job, I hated it.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated it. We went away, and I came back, and all of a sudden this job just clicked. And I was like, this isn't about cleaning cars, it's about customer service. So because it was a graduate programme, it was very generic. It used my very generic degree. And I did a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
A bit of customer service, bit of sales, bit of account management, account management in terms of managing our fleet accounts and our local body shops and selling company cars to them to give to people that had accidents. And so we did that, and I was working like 70, 80 hours a week. Enterprise Rent-a-Car was really new in the UK at that point. And that's where I met my husband.
But do you look back on that now then and think, actually, that orientation around the business and seeing different things was really good for you?
Really good.
Was that like an apprenticeship for you, almost?
Sort of.
Like a grounding?
So the graduate programme would normally take someone between 12 and 18 months to pass it. And in your induction, you were given this big folder and it was empty, pretty much.
You were going to fill it.
And it had a few different inserts in it, and your job was to fill it, right? And each section, each quarter, if you like, had a bunch of stuff that you had to do. And it was a basic business grounding. It was a grounding into running a rental branch.
Yeah.
I started work at Hertford, and that was my local. And so I'd drive to Hertford, I'd be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, I wouldn't leave until 7, 8 o'clock at night. I was contracted to 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
Signed away your working time directive immediately. And I was like, I can do this. Can I? And so I worked through it. And I worked through the book, and when your folder was finished, you went to your sign off, and your sign off was called the grill.
Oh, right. Who was at the sign off then? The grill.
The grill was your area manager and your regional manager, and they would grill you
on everything
that you'd learned. And I sat in that interview for about 3 or 4 hours. Just sweating.
So daunting, but looking back again, what do you think to that as a process?
Well, I failed the first one. And I didn't pass the first time I went through the grill. And I'll never forget it. And it was really upsetting because I thought I've covered everything and I've done really well. And they really, really went to town on this accounting process. The JV process, the journal voucher process, it was. And it was about how you write off overcharges.
Okay.
And I'd understood what they were, but I hadn't actually managed it, and I hadn't managed through clearing a P&L down and clearing the account down and getting rid of these kind of overcharges, overbills. And so the regional manager said, it's not your fault you've failed. That's your boss's fault you failed, because he's let you fail, because he knows what you should have done to pass this, because he's passed his and he's got other people through it. So that's his fault. So we want you to manage that for a month, and we will see you again in a month, and we'll park the whole grill. We're just going to talk to you about this. So for a month, I made it my purpose. I was going to learn it, and I'm going to learn it inside out, back to front, know exactly what I'm doing. And so I was one of the quickest people to pass the grill. I was from a management trainee, I was a management assistant overnight at about 10 months in. And I'd been there probably just over a year, and I was given the keys to my first branch as a branch manager. So I really enjoyed it for 3 years. Right, really enjoyed it for 3 years. And I I had a line manager, my boss, my area manager. We had a massive fallout with my line manager, my area manager at the time, and I ended up losing my temper and sticking 2 fingers up and saying, I'm off. I'm done. Like,
so a rage quit.
Like, have my notice. I'm not,
I'm out.
I'm having this week off. Then I've got 2 weeks off for the wedding. I ain't coming back.
Yeah.
That's my notice. And we were only engaged for a week's notice for every year we'd work, so I needed to give 3 weeks notice. I just walked out one day and said, I'm
That's
off,
it.
I'm not coming back.
And is that how it played out then?
And that is how it played out. So it was great because I had the summer off.
So again, has that ever been a useful experience? Because you must have seen people do that then in your
Well, it came back to
HR role.
bite me when my old boss became my new husband's boss.
Yeah, no, I was wondering if that was going to happen.
So Pete got promoted into an area manager's role, and my old boss got promoted into a regional manager's role and became Pete's regional manager.
So did it
in
affect
Midlands.
Pete?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
So did he pay the price for your,
well,
in terms of their
yeah,
relationship?
he did and he didn't. So he clearly never got on with this guy either. And this guy was a bully. Right? And I look back at it now and go, I was bullied and Pete was bullied. But by this point I was working in HR. And so I'd had, there's a bit in the middle to go back to, I guess, but I was working in HR by this point, and we had just gathered evidence after evidence after evidence and said, at some point you're going to need to confront this, but you're going to have to be ready for it. So although Pete should be like a baby boomer, right, in terms of actually generationally he has all the traits of a baby boomer in terms of gets into a company and stays there.
Yep.
Right, really loyal. Right, it was really admirable. But really loyal, and he climbed the ranks in enterprise. But it was so stressful. It was such a stressful organisation and business to work for as they were growing rapidly.
So were you encouraging him then to think about his stress levels and how he might cope with that and other opportunities elsewhere?
I was trying to encourage him to pursue opportunities elsewhere, and he didn't really want to. He enjoyed his job. Yeah. And he enjoyed the team he worked in, and he enjoyed what he was doing, and he was knowledgeable at what he did. But you could tell that
the toll it was taking.
He was being targeted for being pushed out the business, and was being targeted for disciplinaries and things that they weren't disciplinaries when you look back at it. It was just a way of exiting him. So he turned up one day, had been invited in for a disciplinary, and he came in with this folder of a grievance against his boss and said, I'm happy to do that, but I also want to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
And so the HR person at the time said, what's that?
Yeah.
It's about him. So I don't want him doing this disciplinary because I want to talk to you about him. And so Pete was taken out, was told to sit in the corridor. He was left sitting in the corridor for 2 hours. And he was brought back in, and he was given an agreement to leave.
Right.
And they didn't want to deal with the grievance at all. They wanted to keep him, and so so Pete ultimately left the business. We struck him a really good deal in the end, and so he stayed off work for 6 months.
And you've gone into HR at this point. You mentioned that, so sort of. So you're at Whitbread now.
Well, no. So we get married. I have summer off, and I took a temp job. Back into sales of all things, right? I was selling Microsoft licensing, but it was local and it was easy, and it was a temp job. It was a 3-month temp job, right? Yeah. And I was like, I don't really know what I want to do, but I've got to go back to work and I've got to get some money. Just married, I should probably pay my way a little bit in this relationship, and so did it for 3 months. I was doing it for 3 months. So I had a 3-month probation period. They wanted to sign off my probation period. And I went, well, I don't know. I'm a bit lazy. And
so you were trying to put them off?
So I was trying to put them off signing off my probation period. And so we agreed to extend my probation period for a month because I'd been trying to find something more permanent. And I was working with a few different recruitment agencies to try and find a permanent role. And this one agency phoned me and said, why don't you do this? Why don't you get into recruitment? And I was like, hadn't really considered it. And so I went and met with them and I went through the whole recruitment process. But they didn't want to start me before Christmas. They wanted to start me in January. So I had to put off this company that wanted
I see.
to...
Yeah. So you're buying time.
Maybe it's not working quite out for both of us and maybe you should extend my probation period. And so they agreed. And then the first week back in January, I went, there's my notice. I'm not coming back. The week's notice. So they were fuming. But I went to work in recruitment in an agency and I did it for 18 months and I was quite good at it and I enjoyed it. And again, it was about people and it was a bit salesy because actually a recruitment role is a sales job.
Yeah.
So I was on the phone constantly trying to hit targets. How many people can you bring? How many hiring managers can you get hold of and stuff? And then how many people can you place into positions? And I'd probably done it for about 18 months and I thought I was making really good money. And I just was like, I'm putting people in a job for the sake of it because it gets me a commission check at the end of it. And I'm not really sure that I'm being as moral as I could be and I'm not quite telling the candidate the truth about the company and I'm not telling the company quite the truth about the candidate. And I'm manipulating CVs because that's what recruiters did at that point, manipulating CVs to fit and push them in. And so I thought if I want to do this, and I do quite enjoy it and I'm actually quite good at it, I want to put the right person in the right job at the right time in the right company. I should probably go in-house and do this. So I gave up the commission piece and I went in-house. And I went to work for a recruitment outsourcing business called Capital Consulting. And they were a really small business. And they had a contract with Whitbread. Capital Consulting were then taken over by Alexander Mann. And on day one of me joining Whitbread, and I'd gone in to recruit for Costa Coffee. Day one of me being there, there's the team from Capital Consulting are there. Nice. Great. Met by the team. Can you all come into a meeting?
Oh, here we go.
The contract's been terminated. You're all going to transfer to work for Whitbread. And I was like, hold on a second. Friday, that other company were asking me to stay. And if you'd have just let me know this was going on, I'd have stayed. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. As often these things can be, can't they?
You know, in hindsight, it was like one of the best things that happened. And so I went to work for Whitbread. I transferred across to work for Whitbread. I'd worked recruiting store managers for Costa for 2 months and then they'd restructured the team a little bit and I ended up going to work for Premier Inn and recruiting for Premier Inn. And this, Whitbread had this habit of restructuring every 12 months. It's such a big organisation, 42,000 employees at the time. They restructured their head office teams quite regularly to fit what the business needed. And I just survived redundancy every time. And was lucky enough I got a better job every time we'd gone through a restructure. And so in 2008, early 2009, I found myself pregnant. And I was due back to work when was I due back? Like February, March 2010. Yep. And I'd said I was going to come back to work in March. For the start of the new, come back to work for March for the start of the new financial year, or beginning of April, and they put me into redundancy consultation while I was on maternity leave, and I was like, give it to someone else. That's fine. I don't, gives me a little bit more time off. I'll find another job. Give it to somebody. Give the job to somebody who is at risk, because we were going from office based to field based. And so different conversations happened. I had a conversation with the HR director who said, no, you get your butt back in the office and we want to see you through the consultation process. This is what we want to give you. So I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. And then so I went through the redundancy process and I said, oh, by the way, I'm not coming back to work until May because I've got a holiday booked in April and actually I can't get my daughter into nursery until May. So they'd done this whole redundancy process and then found out they had no talent planning team for 2 months because it made everybody redundant. Then I said I wasn't coming back for a while and they wanted to recruit the other roles. So I come back to work in May and I'd had some conversations. I had a load of holiday from my maternity leave And I originally only wanted to come back to work 3 days a week. I wanted to do a couple of weeks at 3 days a week, a couple of weeks at 4 days a week. So I could try and manipulate my way of being back into work. And I remember having this conversation with the HR, like ER manager at the time that said, no, it's not going to work for us. Come back 5 days a week or don't come back. Sorry, what? How are you having this conversation? Like, that's not very...
How do you hold all the cards?
And they said, why do you want to do 3 days? Why do you then want a couple of weeks at 3 days, a couple of weeks at 4 days? And I said, well, I'm really, been at home. It's not about me. It's about my daughter. It's about getting her settled at nursery. And they said, well, what if she doesn't settle? And I said, well, I'd have to leave. And they said, well, take it or leave it. Come back to work or don't.
Leading to Here. For mental models and tools for leaders, visit our YouTube channel, Thinking Focus.
Tell us more about this. We're two blokes sitting here, right? So we have a different experience. So how is this? This transition from working hard and your career's going great, and then you have a child and it stops and it pauses, and then it's like this. It's really hard to get back into it, and there are obstacles. How do you cope with that? What do you do?
So this was my first kind of battle, I think, in terms of, oh wow, we can't treat people like... We're HR and we're treating people like that. We're treating people in HR like that. How does this happen? And so I kind of just went, oh, I'll just come back to work 5 days a week then. I didn't really think that much of it.
Right.
And actually, at this point, I still wasn't that ambitious. Right, so Harriet was, 9 months old at this point. I'm going back to work. I'm going back to work to the role that I thought I was doing before I went on maternity. It just happened to be field-based and not office-based. And I didn't really think that much of it. I was still in recruitment, as far as I was concerned. And I wasn't really in the space of, this is HR. I just knew I wasn't really treated right.
Yeah.
Or I knew it wasn't right.
It didn't feel right.
It didn't feel right. And there were some other things, obviously, in different roles where it wasn't right. And
you must have felt some annoyance about that, though.
Yeah, but I just got on with it. Like, I was annoyed about it at the time. And then just went, oh, well.
It's just how it is.
It's just how it is. Just, okay, fair enough. They've rejected what I wanted. I'll come back to work. And so I did. And I came back to work. I threw myself into it. I threw myself into being mum, working mum. And what it did for me was made me really organised, right? So Harriet went to nursery.
So you've got like military precision
we
around everything.
We live in Northampton. Pete's family are in Nottingham. My family are in Stevenage. We're there somewhere in the middle. So we had no family support.
Yeah, no network.
Looking after Harriet. And so she went to nursery and probably been there about 6 months and built this network of other professional mums. And you'd seen the same harried mums in the car park in the morning doing the drop-off, throwing the kids at the door, take my child, and then the same mums like whizzing into the car park at 5 to 6 going, I'm not late, am I?
So how do you cope with that, though? Because there's a parental guilt thing that people feel. I know I felt it as a dad, when I've had to spend time away, working away, not being there for everything. How do you cope with that as a mum?
Well, I felt guilty when I was at work that I wasn't with Harriet. And when I was with Harriet, I felt I was guilty for not being at work.
Yeah.
And I maximised my day. So when I was at work, I was at work. I just switched off to everything else outside of work. And I managed my time religiously through my diary. I mean, look at my diary now. My diary is completely colour-coded, and I know what certain colours mean. So I know how it is, how I spend my time, and I use my work diary to put my personal stuff in, and I block stuff out around it.
Me too. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, that does feel familiar.
But you took on the role then of, kind of the ambitious career stuff, which has led you today to be in a senior leadership team, female in a senior leadership team. Tell us a little bit about that.
The only female.
The only female. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I'd been at Whitbread. I left there, and I realised that I'd been there nearly 7 years. Somebody had asked me, how long had you been here? How long have you been here? And I was like, about 3 years. And then I realised I hadn't been here 6 years. And I wanted to do my CIPD. Whitbread hire a lot of graduates, and they would put their graduates through their CIPD. And I'd had various different roles. I've been there for 6.5 years. I think I had 5 different jobs while I was there. progression, and lucky progression through redundancies and restructures and things. And then the one job I wanted, the HR manager role I wanted, I actually worked quite hard to get there. I did a couple of comments as I was nosy, so I made sure that I knew what the ER team were doing. I made sure I knew what the learning team was doing and stuff. And so when I left Whitbread, I was the HR manager for Brewers Fayre, and I was headhunted. I went to work for Greene King, went into head of resourcing role at Greene King. Went from this kind of really nice environment of Whitbread to this quite very different polar opposite environment of Greene King. And I didn't stay very long. I was only there for 6 months. It just didn't agree with me. Okay. Morally, it just didn't agree with me. I couldn't work in that environment. I was very different. Different way of thinking, different way of working. And so I left there, and I was, at that point I had an opportunity to go back to Whitbread. Didn't take it. But I did go to work for Travelodge. So hotels again, new hotels, and everybody was like, really? You've gone from Premier Inn to Travelodge? So but at that point I'd had my confidence knocked at Greene King quite badly, and I'd taken some time out of the business sick at that point, to kind of rebuild mentally. And so I didn't go back from that, and I went to work for Travelodge. And I said Travelodge would only ever be a 2-year job for me. It was all just about
getting experience, back on your feet,
getting back on my feet, getting the confidence back, etc. And so I was there for just short of 2 years, and I'd been approached a couple of times to work for Welcome Break. And I had this view of it of high-vis jackets, flat shoes, not very sexy, really expensive fuel and dirty toilets. This is my view of motorway services. And the recruiter at the time said, like, seriously, come and meet them. This business is so different to what you think it is. So I went to meet my line manager, who was going to be my line manager, a guy called Carl Jolly. And he was a big inspiration to me. And I met him, and I gelled with him really quickly, and I really liked him. And he gave me lots of insight into the business and this kind of franchise operation. And what really sold it for me was, so what you're telling me is I get to work with some of these really big high street names. I get to work with Waitrose, Starbucks, KFC, Burger King, Subway. And then put all of these like on my CV. But I don't actually have to work for them, but I'm going to work with them.
So you're going to understand a myriad of different businesses.
So it's like, I was like, okay, I'll give it a go.
So because it's quite clearly you get a transient audience by the nature of it, don't you?
Yep.
But how do you cope with that? Because it's probably not something that everyone does. So how do you try and stand out in your field?
It's been a really long journey to kind of what is that standout. So Carl had got me really interested in the business, and I had to go and meet the chief exec for breakfast one day, Rod Mackay. Oh my God, what a character. Like the most charismatic man that you could ever meet. And he tried to tell me all the horrible things about working for the business. And I was like, no, I'm up for this challenge. Yeah. And so I joined as head of people, working for Carl and Rod. And then in October 2018, the business was sold. Or part of the business was sold. 50% of the business, 51% of the business was sold to this little Irish business that no one had ever heard of, called Applegreen, who are the founders of the business still are the group chairman and the group CEO, as they are now. And so the business went through this massive amount of turmoil, if you like, of this significant change in the ownership. And we'd kind of gone from being equity bank, pension fund operator owned, and we were the operators, Welcome Break were the operators, Rod was the operator, to the chief exec, the people director, the commercial director, and the old finance director, 4 of the senior leadership team leaving within 12 months.
Okay.
And none of them coming in through the Applegreen transition. Yeah. And so this opportunity arose for me to step into the role of people director on an interim basis.
You think twice?
No, didn't think twice about it. If I wasn't going to do it, who was going to do it?
You see, what's really interesting is Nicola says she's not ambitious, but if you look at everything in what you've described, I think you mistake ambition from curiosity, because you've always had this thirst for something to find something else, to be curious about, well, what else can I do?
Yeah.
How else can I do it?
I think the ambition came when Pete stepped back.
Yeah,
Because we couldn't both be ambitious having a young daughter. And so when he took a step back, I said, right, now's my turn then. I'm going to do this now. I've stepped back for you. Now you can sit and you can be the more steady 9 to 5 or 8 till 6 job. And I'm going to be the one that I want. It's my turn now. I want to drive my career.
But if you think back, even everything that you've talked about, even the traits within that showed levels of progression and wanting a little bit more. You know, even from, you know, some of the hospitality stuff, you know, I want to find out that and I want to find out that. Because when I look at your background, you look at it and you go, you've accumulated all the building blocks of what makes HR. So even when you hadn't got them, you went, right, how does this work? How does this work? Alongside doing, you know, your CIPD, etc. But you go, where's the practical experience that helps me? And it was almost like you were collecting them for this point.
Yeah, but you didn't necessarily realise it.
You didn't recognise it as
but probably
ambitious.
probably not recognising it as ambition, because I never set out with a goal of, I want to be this by this point, until I worked for Welcome Break. And that was the point. I joined Welcome Break, and it was a conversation with Carl and Rod where they said, well, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a HR director by the time I'm 40.
And what happened there? Did that
And
just come out
how
of the
did
air?
that come out of my mouth? Like, that was like an unconscious thought that I have to sometimes learn to engage my brain before I open my mouth. And that was one of those moments of, I didn't realise that, I didn't know that.
But then this opportunity arises. Step into this,
which I never
people director role.
anticipated. Like, didn't anticipate the sale of Welcome Break, and that Carl, who had been there for 15 years, 12 years, 15 years before me, was going to leave. Now, I'd done a lot of the due diligence work for the sale of the business and had to prepare a lot of that due diligence information in my role. And I was due to go on holiday. I was due to go to Florida in late October for half term, and then into November. And prior to me going on holiday, like, I just remember Carl being like really stressed out, like, and I came back from my holiday, and the sale of the business had gone through on the 31st of October, and we were then 50% shared, 51% owned by Applegreen. And I came back from my holiday, and Carl was like skipping around the office like a little spring lamb, and I was like, what's going on here then? And I said to my colleague at the time, I said, he's resigned. And then we had a visit from the group HR director, who just started in Dublin, and she came over, and Carl called me into a meeting room and said, I'm going to let you know, she's going to talk to you later, I've resigned. I was like, I knew it. And I was like, right, okay. And so I had this first meeting with this group HR director, and we never quite saw eye to eye. So what John had then said is, or what Carl had said is, John, now chief exec, he's going to ring you later. He's going to ask you to step into my role on an interim basis. Oh, okay. He said, no, you can't just go, yeah, okay. Think about this and think about what you want to get out of it. What do you want to do? Do you want this role on a more permanent basis? So, I'd stepped into the people role on an interim basis. Our finance director had stepped into the role on an interim basis as well. And we were trying to acquaint this new chief exec who'd come in with the business, with the Applegreen piece. And Applegreen, as they were, well, we've bought you and you're going to do as you're told. Like, this is how we do business, and you're going to do business in our way. And we went, no. We're Welcome Break. You're going to do business our way. And so we had quite a lot of bumping of heads for quite a long time. And I went into this with what do you do when a business is really struggling with a cultural change? We need to bring this back to who are we, and what do we stand for, and why are we here, and what are our values? And so I stood up in our conference in March 2019, 4 months after the business had been taken over, and gone, I'll talk to you again about our vision, our purpose, our values, and who we are, and what is the DNA that runs through all of us and why we're all here.
So hence when I asked about how you stand out, this is the long journey that you've been on.
Yeah. And so for me, it was all about our moral standpoint as much as anything. It was about being true to ourselves and not just kind of turning. Welcome Break's got a 50-year history. And we can't just flip that overnight and go, well, we're now this business, so we'll behave in this way.
Yeah.
And so we really brought our values and our purpose back to life. Yeah. And it had kind of slipped a little bit over the last few years and stuff. And so we really wanted to bring it back to life. And so we built the whole reward recognition package around it. How do we instill these values and how do we make sure that everybody's got the elevator pitch of
why we're here?
What are our values? And now we can walk around the business and say to everybody, what are our values? And they'll tell you.
So what are the Welcome Break ones then?
We care, we're a team, and we deliver. So we've got a customer, we care about our customers, we care about each other, we care about our business. We're a team, so we're one big team, but we wear many different uniforms. Yeah. And then we deliver. So we deliver profit, we deliver our audits, and we deliver for each other, and we deliver for our customer.
Yeah.
Really simple.
Yeah.
And so I've taken all of those learnings from all of the years, for all of the different people I've worked for or worked with, and said, what sort of leader do I want to be?
Nicola, thank you for sharing your story of leading to here. Some fascinating insights. We like to end by asking you 3 quick questions, so we're looking for quick fire answers.
Okay. No practice on these ones then.
So, first question. Looking back, what's the one thing you're most proud of in your career?
My daughter.
One thing you do differently if you could go back?
Do you know what? I wouldn't even go back to saying to my boss at Enterprise, do one. What would I do differently? Nothing.
And one thing that gives you energy to keep going?
Just people.
Thank you, Nicola.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, Ricky. Really interesting and insightful chat with Nicola. What stood out for you?
Well, yes, it was really interesting, really enjoyable. I think we've clearly got a really focused individual here, somebody who's very driven, never satisfied, always looking for more. Yeah. And I mean that in herself. She's looking to improve at every opportunity. She's looking almost as if she knew where she was going to end up. So she started collecting experiences. She started collecting knowledge. She started almost shaping a career before she realised, like she said, I want to be a HR director, and didn't know where that came from.
No, I agree. But it almost subconsciously, as if she was ticking things off that would be useful for her along the way.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, she said, I'm not ambitious. And I kind of went, but I think you are. And I don't think you've labelled it as ambition. Yeah. Because she's been collecting these experiences, she's been putting herself out there, acquiring this knowledge, acquiring these skills, and it's just set her up for, to become, people director for Welcome Break, 6,500 people. And I know she's really driven. She's really focused in the way she runs her team and looks after those 6,500 people, because she's constantly looking to go, okay, I can do that with my eyes shut. Now what?
Yeah, she might not think about it as being ambition, but there's a desire for growth, isn't there, that is pushing her.
Yeah, almost an obsessive desire for growth, and that was really interesting for me, because she was very generous in the conversation that we had. She was, we had to cut a fair bit out, didn't we? But just from a timing perspective, but it was interesting, and she was really open and shared a great deal in terms of the journey that she's gone on. So
there's quite a bit on the cutting room floor, because she was so generous to there's so much stuff she's done, she's into, she's thinking about, she's working on. It really was a challenge for us to cut that down, because there was so much of it. So she was incredibly generous.
She's definitely somebody we should listen to.
Definitely someone we should listen to. Remember to join us next time on Leading to Here, where we'll be talking to another insightful, interesting, thought-provoking, everyday leader that is operating almost as an unsung hero. We'd really love it if you'd like, share and subscribe to Leading to Here. And if you'd like to know more from us at Thinking Focus, then you can find us online at thinkingfocus.com. Until next time.
Leading to Here. For more episodes, visit us at thinkingfocus.com/leading to here.